Are you saying that in this fantasy budget that somehow the GDP is going to massively grow at the same time having deficits that are going to be 80% higher than what even Justin Trudeau had, which is surprising?
I think it's pretty offensive for Canadians who are listening this morning.
Mr. Garon, I know that you want to make clips for social media.
And food prices are rising 50% faster in Canada than the U.S. When will food prices and grocery prices come down?
Well, at the Operations Committee, the PBO said the path we're on currently isn't sustainable. And when he was asked what year the budget will be balanced, the PBO said, is that a trick question?
Well,
I mean, but it's not a trick question. It's a question that Canadians need answered.
You say you want to change how you budget. And I have to ask myself, why not change your reckless spending instead?
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
I would like to welcome the Minister of Finance, the Honourable François Philippe Champagne, and Chris Forbes, ADM.
Minister, what are your fiscal anchors?
Madam Chair, and I'd like to say thank you to the member of the committee. It's a real pleasure to see you. We have been very clear during the campaign that we will be balancing the operating budget in the next 3 years.
That's your fiscal anchor?
That is a fiscal anchor that we have been talking about and that we put in the platform.
Are there more?
We said that there will be a declining deficit to GDP over the same period.
Okay, so the deficit to GDP ratio that you're claiming is supposed to decline, the PBO says that he doesn't think so. And he doesn't even think that you have fiscal anchors right now. Is he right?
I would say different parliamentary budget officers have had a different view, I would say, than the one you're referring to now. I would say, Madam Chair, Canadians should rejoice because Canada has a very strong fiscal position. We have the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7.
Minister,
we have the lowest deficit to GDP ratio in the G7.
Sticking on the deficit
we are
to
only
GDP
one
ratio,
of few countries in the G7
your
which has
fiscal
a
to GDP
triple A credit
ratio
rating.
was supposed to be 1%. It's doubled right now. And you're saying that it's supposed to decline. It doesn't look like it's going to decline. You literally, according to the PBO, are going to have 80% higher deficits and the economy is shrinking. So how do you square that? How do you square having higher deficits, a shrinking economy, your deficit to GDP ratio is already double what you claimed it was supposed to be? How is it supposed to decline?
Madam Chair, I have more confidence in Canadians and the Canadian economy perhaps than my colleague. Canada has a very enviable fiscal position. When you look at the G7, Madam Chair, and I attend these meetings, I chair them, you would say that our colleagues would say that Canada has a very stable fiscal position. We have the means of our ambition, and we're going to seize that generational opportunity. Having the lowest debt to GDP ratio and the lowest deficit to GDP ratio in the G7, plus a AAA credit rating, I would argue, and I know you're the official critics for finance, so you would know that, that is a pretty enviable position. Only Germany has a AAA credit rating in the G7, and Canada is one of them.
You know,
we have a
Canada
very strong fiscal position.
Fastest shrinking economy in the G7, and saying that we would have the AAA credit rating is almost like a participation ribbon right now for Canadians waiting in food bank lines, because they're the ones who are suffering with your government spending. And again, you didn't answer the question specifically. You're claiming that the deficit to GDP ratio is going to be going down, but there's no specifics. Are you saying that in this fantasy budget that somehow the GDP is going to massively grow at the same time having deficits that are going to be 80% higher than what even Justin Trudeau had, which is surprising?
I think it's pretty offensive for Canadians who are listening this morning to your comments, because Canadians will be reminded that your government,
I'll correct you, Minister, that the PBO said that about your ratio. He said that your ratio is very alarming, stupefying, shocking, and unsustainable. That's what the PBO said. We agree. Canadians agree. Do you agree?
I would say there is Kevin Page said, and I quote, Madam Chair,
is the PBO lying?
Madam Chair, do you want me to answer? Otherwise, I'm happy to listen to your question.
It was
all
a
day,
yes or no answer, Minister.
But if you want me to answer, if you just want to ask the question and no answer, Canadians will follow their judgment.
Yes, Mr. Turnbull.
Chair, I know that it's the informal practice at committee, because I've been on many committees, to give the minister at least as much time as it took the member to ask the question, at least. The minister wasn't even able to get the first word out.
On the point of order.
Mr. Kelly.
The minister ran my colleague's clock earlier in the round. I think it works itself out.
Okay,
Mr. Hillan, I'll just ask everyone to maintain a respectful atmosphere. Thank you.
Definitely. Okay, I don't see the minister will answer that, because we all believe the PBO in saying that the finances are unsustainable. Moving on, like you said in your statement, you want to make operational spending, whatever that is, and balance it in 3 years. The Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, tried this failed experiment in the UK last year. It failed horribly, and now you guys are trying to try the same accounting trick here in Canada. When at the end of the day, the bottom line is still the bottom line. I'll quote the PBO in what he's saying for your claims about splitting it between operating and capital costs. The PBO said, "We haven't seen a clear definition of what would fall into capital and would fall into operating." He further said about your operating budget that we currently don't have a definition of operating budget. He went on to say something very alarming. The bottom line of the government will not change, which means debt is still debt at the end of the day. It doesn't matter how many columns you try to present in front of Canadians and try to trick them. He went on to say the international public sector standards that everyone uses to measure the deficit and levels of debt will not change. The first reason that won't change is those are the accounting standards. The second reason is the ratings agencies won't let you change it. That's the first thing they're going to go to. And if they have a sniff that somehow there's a change in presentation, you bet your boots that we're going to be paying more for debt pretty quickly. So you guys are going to try the same failed experiment that Mark Carney advised the UK government on just last year. So are you guys going to be cooking the books, trying to trick Canadians with these tricky accounting practices, or both?
I think, Madam Chair, it's irresponsible for a member of Parliament to use language like that. I will say that. It's irresponsible. Because the member knows full well that we're not replacing anything, we're adding. This is a new lens for people at home to understand.
Would the minister agree debt is debt?
Madam Chair, I'm happy to listen to his question, but if I'm not allowed to respond to the same time, I've been a minister for quite some time in this House. Normally, I have the same time than
That's
the colleague.
Why it's not a new government.
Canadians deserve to correct the record because that was an irresponsible statement.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Mr. Hillan. That's time.
How can you say in the same speech that you consult the committee that consultation with the opposition parties is important, and yet you come out with a budget and the last 200 groups that were supposed to appear in committee have had to wait a year? How are you even capable of saying such things? Is that the Liberal thinking? You should be happy to see the extent that I respect Parliament. Mr. Garon, I know that you want to make clips for social media.
Minister, since your government doubled the national debt, Canadians are stuck with a bill that sees more tax dollars going to bankers and bondholders in interest payments on the debt your government accumulated than what goes to healthcare transfers to the provinces. Can you confirm in Budget 2025, bankers and bondholders will get less than what goes to provinces for healthcare transfers?
You know what? I won't stand here and to be lectured by a member of the Conservative, Madam Chair, who voted against every measure we presented to support Canadians. This member and his colleagues have voted against pharmacare.
Minister,
they voted
it was a
against
simple
dental
question.
care.
Can you just confirm that for
against
Canadians?
Helping children
that
with
healthcare transfers
with
will
the
be
children
larger
food program across the nation,
than what
Madam
goes
Chair?
to bankers and bondholders? It's a simple yes or no question, Minister. As usual, you're not answering.
For Canadians who are watching you, I think they should go to look at your voting record and really answer the question, why did you vote against
I will take
families
that
and workers when we
as
provided
bankers and
support?
I would
When you
just
want to talk
ask
about
members and the
affordability.
Minister not to talk over each other for the interpreters,
I'll take
please.
that as bankers and bondholders will once again get more money in interest payments on this government's debt on Canadian taxpayers than what goes to healthcare transfers. Minister, in September of 2023, you made a big spectacle. You were going to haul in all the grocery store CEOs, and you claimed that by Thanksgiving 2023, grocery prices would come down. 2 years later, it's almost Thanksgiving 2025. Grocery inflation has skyrocketed due to liberal grocery tax and other taxes and the amount of money that you guys spent. On top of all that, we see overall grocery price inflation has increased to almost 7%. Essentials at the grocery store, like ground beef, is up 30% since then. Apples almost up 40%. Tomatoes up 15%. Chicken up 20%. And food prices are rising 50% faster in Canada than the U.S. When will food prices and grocery prices come down?
Well, I would say, Madam Chair, for Canadians who are watching, I invite you to vote in favor of C4. C4 provides a middle-class tax cut to 22 million
Will
Canadians.
C4 lower grocery prices, yes or no?
I could not understand the question, Madam Chair, because I was talking whilst the member was asking me to respond. But I would say I would invite all the members, and I'm sure because he's a very influential member of the Conservative caucus, to convince his colleagues to vote for C4, because C4 actually will reduce taxes for 22 million Canadians. That is the kind of measure that puts more money in the pockets of Canadians, and that's the kind of affordability measure that Canadians will be wanting.
We've been here for almost a month, and we could have heard from stakeholders, but because of the games that have been played, we haven't had that ability. So I'll ask the minister today, what are the cornerstones of this upcoming budget is your new way of framing expenses, the capital investments and versus the operating costs? How will this help both the government and private organizations, particularly those in the construction trade, invest in Canada and help build us the strongest economy in the G7?
I say thank you to Mr. McDonald and to Prince Edward Island. We're all happy that the chair of what we call the federal, provincial, and territorial group of finance ministers chaired by the Prince Edward Island, and I did inform the chair this morning of our new way of doing. I think it's very simple. The world is changing at a pace that we have rarely seen before. The speed, the scale, and the scope of the change require that we adapt. And today it gives us an opportunity to focus on our core objective, which is to spend less so we can invest more. And that's why we're presenting a new capital budgeting framework and a new budget cycle. The first one responds to clarity because members of Parliament have been asking us to committee, and I know the Vice Chair will go in the record, but we have been asked by this Parliament to change the budget cycle in order to leave more time for parliamentarians to see the budget when they vote for the main estimates, because the main estimates have to be presented by 31st of March. And therefore, you have had instances in the past where budget came after main estimates, which is not ideal. So we've been asked and we're responding to that. The second thing is predictability. If you're a province, a territory, or a business, or even more, Madam Chair, I think about all these organizations in the country that depend for their functioning and their operation on federal funding. They'd like to know whether they'd get funds in the budget ahead of their own fiscal year, because now it's difficult for them, whether, depending on the time of their fiscal year, they don't know what's going to be the federal contribution. And lastly, Mr. McDonald, you understand that because you've been an entrepreneur, you've been very successful, and we're lucky to have you in Parliament now. But construction season, if there's one thing that doesn't wait for parliamentarian, is the construction season. And that won't be a surprise to our friends from Alberta, because in Alberta, in different parts of the country, I've heard from people that say, and I was infrastructure minister before, they say, can you align your decisions with the construction season? If you're presenting a budget in the spring, and, for example, you need to build in the north, you need to book the barge a year in advance. You can book that. You can book your workers. You cannot have requests for proposal from entrepreneurs by the time it's too late. So we can't afford as a nation to miss one other construction season. We can't afford that. We need to make generational investment in our future, and that's why this framework will help us to focus on what matters, prioritize our investment, and be more transparent to Canadians. That's why you have seen provinces, and even the vice chair of the committee with the group, provinces and groups, you will see they're saying to us, thank you for changing that, because that's what we've been asking, and we're responding to the wish of Parliament. And for me, it's about setting the clock straight. And after that, the committee with the chair will have to decide when you do your budget consultation. We'll certainly do that all across the summer, and we do that all the year. And I want to thank Mr. Turnbull for all the work he's done this summer. We've heard from One thing which is slightly offensive is to say you've not consulted. I mean, this is probably in 10 years the largest public consultation for a budget that we have seen. And therefore, I think that this is going to be welcomed by Canadians. They want more transparency and more clarity. And by presenting what's the difference or where their money goes with respect to capital investment and day-to-day spending, I think it's adding. That's why I don't understand my conservative colleagues in their criticism, because this is adding, it's not replacing. It's just providing a new lens. And I can tell you the deficit and the debt will be recorded in the same manner as in previous budgets, but it's going to provide an additional lens. So you provide more information to people, and as parliamentarians, we should all welcome that.
What year will budget be balanced?
Our budget will be a generational investment in the future of this country, and you're going to be happy, Mr. Kelly, because there'll be a lot for you to talk about to your people in Alberta.
But if you don't mind, Minister, would you answer my question? And what year will it be balanced?
And like I said, I've already responded to this question, but what you're going to see is generational investments to put this country on a path for
no, Minister,
the
you may
strongest
have,
economy in the G7.
Minister, you may have responded to the question, but you haven't answered it. So I'm asking you, since this is a parliamentary committee, if you would answer the question. In what year will the budget balance?
I've already answered that question. You can ask me as many times as you want, sir, but the answer is going to be very similar to what I've told you before. I've already answered that question, and we've been very clear that we're going to be balancing the operating budget by 28-29.
Okay. Minister, it's correct. You have been asked this question many times, including by me. You have responded many times. You have never answered it. You have just now said something about an operating budget. So I understand that you are distracting Canadians with accounting rule changes, but I'd like you to answer. I'll give you one more chance to answer my question. When will the budget be balanced?
I've heard you very well, and I think it's irresponsible for a member of parliament to suggest the question you've been asking. The deficit and the debt will be calculated and presented as it has always been in accordance with the accounting principle. So I would say Canadians are watching that, and they're watching you carefully. What we're saying, they understand it. I just did a press conference, and I trust you. Canadians understand that. They really understand that. They said the government will present a new lens, so they have more transparency, more clarity. And you should talk to your colleagues at the provincial level. They really welcome what we're doing, sir. And that's what you've been asking me. So for the record, the Committee of Parliament has been asking
Minister,
the Minister of Finance to change the budget cycle.
We're
not responding to the wish of Parliament.
Minister, you are refusing to answer the question, as you have refused to answer this question repeatedly. So I am left to conclude that the budget will never be balanced under this government. In fact, at the Operations Committee, when asked, at the Operations Committee, the PBO said the path we're on currently isn't sustainable. And when he was asked what year the budget will be balanced, the PBO said, is that a trick question?
Well,
I mean, but it's not a trick question. It's a question that Canadians need answered by the Minister of Finance. Will you answer at this committee and tell Canadians what year you will balance the budget?
Let me just quote the previous parliamentary budget officer. It's not shocking to see deficit go up because the economy is slowing and we have NATO commitment. To me, it's sustainable. That's Kevin Page, sir, who has been a parliamentary budget officer for quite some time.
Yes, he did. He did great work.
Actually, what he said is the reflection. I so wish he would be at the G7 meetings with me, because he would say what colleagues are doing. We have the most stable fiscal position of the G7.
Okay, Minister,
we have
no, you're not answering the question, so we'll try a different question, Minister.
You should at least tell Canadians as it is, sir. Those are facts.
Minister,
you can have your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts.
Indeed, Minister,
the facts are what they are, sir. We have a AAA credit rating like Germany.
The current budget deficit is projected to be your current budget deficit does not even include NATO commitments. If we are to include, the C.D. Howe Institute, for example, stated that if we start to include your commitments that you've made publicly, that the deficit may be as high as $90 billion. Is that correct? Will it be over $90 billion if you keep some of your spending promises?
Are you suggesting that we should not meet our NATO commitments or defend the sovereignty of Canada?
No, I'm suggesting that you should answer a question.
Well, the answer is very clear. We're going to meet our NATO commitments. We're going to invest in the sovereignty of Canada. And Canadians have understand the world is changing and we need to make these generational investments.
So when I knock doors in my riding and talk to my constituents, they all say the same thing. They want a growing, strong economy in Canada. They want jobs for their kids. They want affordable housing. So to me, what we're entering here is a budget cycle and a capital budgeting framework. We're making these changes to focus on something we call capital formation. How is that going to help our economy grow?
Well, this is fundamental to the future of our nation. You know, the world is changing. We need to adapt. Like I said, the speed and scale and scope of the change is something once in a generation. And I think as parliamentarian, it's not just the government. I look at my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. We need to meet that moment. People before us have met the moment. I can think in 1945, people met the moment. Canadians instinctively understand when faced with something like that, you need to invest. You need to reduce your expenses. That's why we say we're going to spend less so we can invest
Sorry,
more.
Minister.
Minister, I'd like to have a frank discussion with you. Just simple questions, simple answers. You say you want to change how you budget. And I have to ask myself, why not change your reckless spending instead? Because if I can say to my husband, buying too many purses is an investment, but that doesn't change the fact that it is irresponsible. So my question to you is, why are you changing how you present the budget rather than changing your reckless spending so that on a net basis, you actually balance it?
Well, you should ask yourself why you voted against measures that support Canadians. I think people watching at home would be surprised to see your voting records and say you voted against measures that would make their life more
very
easy.
Simple answer. I really want you to answer my question. Why are you changing how you're presenting it rather than actually trying to balance the budget?
I think Canadians are entitled to transparency. In a frank discussion between you and I think your husband and your family and everyone in your riding is entitled to have more transparency to see the budgeting, where their tax dollars going to be used. I think this is about clarity, transparency.
I agree. Transparency is a good thing. But every single person in my riding does not get to rework their budget to see if it looks better at month end. The bottom line is the bottom line. Yep. If you don't have money, you don't have money. Why are you changing how you're presenting the budget instead of actually balancing it?
So the bottom line is the bottom line, but I think you cannot be against giving more information to Canadians. People want to know where their money is going. Is it for expenses or investment?
The result is the same.
Is the deficit going to be higher than under your government and Mr. Carney's government compared to Trudeau's?
You should be informing your constituent that we have the lowest deficit to GDP ratio in the G7.
Minister, please.
No, but
I'm
that
asking
really
a very
matters.
simple question. Is it going to be higher
That really
than
matters.
Trudeau's or not?
I would say you need to compare our fiscal position with the other G7 country because Canadians look at that. Our colleagues,
Minister,
the bond rating agency.
Numbers don't change. It's black and white. I come from the financial sector. Is it going to be higher than Trudeau's or lower than Trudeau's?
I know you come from the financial sector, and that's why I'm happy you're on the finance committee, but you would know because you're a very smart
Minister. Thank you, Ms. Kobina.
financial
I'm going
planner.
to